Mr. President, always a pleasure to see you.
Likewise, and great to be back in Tianjin and in China.
We understand the Middle East situation continues to get worse as more stakeholders are getting into quote-unquote the war. Now, your immediate response while you are gathering the stakeholders together at the summer Davos.
So I have to say that the geopolitical backdrop that this meeting is happening against is the most volatile and complicated in the 15 years we have had summer Davos in China, and maybe the most complicated since 1945. And we hope for also a de-escalation in the Middle East, so we don't see a full-fledged war.
We understand the UN Security Council on Sunday just had a meeting. Meanwhile, China, Russia, Pakistan, and several others have proposed to have immediate ceasefire. What is the take coming from our forum?
So, as I said, we do hope that we will not have an escalation of the situation in the Middle East, because that will lead to higher oil prices. It will also potentially, of course, lead to more lives lost, but can also have very negative impact on global growth. And the global growth is not doing that well. We do expect 2.8% global growth this year. That is less than just a few months ago, and that is because of conflicts, but also we are also worried about the trade development moving forward. But here, the growth numbers in China are still robust. They're around 5%.
Right.
So China and India are still doing pretty well.
That's one thing, but the other thing is, what about the rules that already existed? For example, the rules regarding denuclearization and the political negotiations and discussion related to that. And also, what about the rules when it comes to what is peace and how to make sure the sovereignty is respected toward one another? All of these earlier well-respected, widely accepted rules now seem to have quote-unquote exceptions. So people are saying, are you in a Shangri-La when you are going to Tianjin and just talk about technology while the rest of the world is seeing a very different reality?
So one can look at it like glass half empty or half full. Right. What is surprising though so far, even with all the tensions, the war in Ukraine, also Israel and Iran de facto being at war with each other.
With the US participating already.
And you have seen a situation in Somalia, you've seen situations also other places where it is very close to a conflict. You saw also escalation between Pakistan and India that was also very worrisome, but it calmed down a few weeks ago. What has been surprising though is that all this geopolitical tension has not led so far to a situation where we have seen a recession, that global growth and the global economy has contracted. We are seeing a slowing growth. Let's see how increased oil prices will also influence this. We also will see how the global trade potential wars will influence on this. But if we, in addition to the conflicts we're seeing today, get into a situation where the global growth will not be there and you see a contraction, there's so little fiscal space for countries to face that, because many countries are so indebted. There's no ammunition. So let's see. If you ask me, I still do hope and think there is a possibility for a de-escalation when it comes to the wars, to find a path towards peace in the Middle East, but also in Ukraine, and that there is a way to work together also so you avoid trade wars. And based on that, the new technologies can increase productivity. And productivity, what is that? That is producing more for less, and that is prosperity. That's the only way to increase people's welfare, to have more resources, to invest in education, in health, and people's livelihoods. So I don't think we should lose the optimism in such a situation either. But one also has to be realistic and not naive. That's also true. So it is, as I said at the beginning,
quite a balance.
Most complicated geopolitical and geoeconomic situation, at least since 1989, that we are faced with in this meeting. But we're not giving up. We're not giving up.
Political dialogue these days, many wonder whether they still work or not, because your forum has been promoting improving the state of the world, and certainly dialogues more than conflicts. But many wonder in the rules of the jungle world whether political dialogue still works.
It's much better to talk to each other and try to find solutions. In that respect, the meeting in London a few weeks ago between the Chinese leadership and the US leadership on trade, I felt was 2 steps forward and 1 back. Hopefully we can avoid a trade conflict between China and the US, because it really matters that these 2 nations do have a constructive dialogue. China is close to 20% of the global GDP, and the US 25%. That adds up to 45% of everything that is developed economically in the world happens in these 2 countries. So we rely also on the future collaboration. Still, China, with its 5% growth, is contributing to more than 30% of the overall global growth. That says something about how big the Chinese economy is, but it also says something about that there is growth in this country, contrary to some other countries that we don't see this kind of growth, more a sluggish growth.
Tariff issue, one country against the rest of the world, has been the top concern for business communities, which is one of the key stakeholders of the World Economic Forum you are engaging with. So what do you make of that from the forum's perspective? And meanwhile, are we going to have to deal with it as long as the most powerful just do whatever they want?
We are at the crossroads. In many ways, we are at the crossroads like we were in 1917, like we were in 1945, and we do hope it's more like 1945 now instead of 1917, that countries also find ways of working together, maybe differently than from the past. I think many of the multilateral organizations do have to reform, but we do hope for a multipolarish world, but also with multilateralism. There needs to be some rules in this.
The negotiations is just a very baby step at this moment. And the trade negotiation, as you know very well, takes tremendous amount of time. And many wonder what would that mean during this transition, if we could use that very diplomatic word.
We haven't seen these low growth numbers in trade for a long time. When it comes to trade in goods, and merchandise, manufactured goods, we can even see a contraction this year. It's, and this used to be the engine behind the growth for decades. But trade is also at the same time changing. We are seeing now more growth, 2 to 3 times stronger growth in services and digital trade and technology than we're seeing in traditional manufacturing of goods. So countries are pivoting. We're also seeing that China is now going much more for technology. We're seeing this year only China will produce 40% more electrical vehicles than last year. That shows that also China is now reforming. And China is also less relying on US as an export market. 10 years ago, 20% of the Chinese export went to the US. Today, the number is 12%. So 88% of the Chinese export goes to other countries than the US. So these 2 countries still rely a lot on each other. but they also already have diversified. But it is challenging period, especially for countries that have based also their growth on export. And I think that's one of the reasons why China is also now saying that it is putting more efforts into Gen AI technology, producing higher up in the value chain. And secondly, also trying to increase domestic consumption, because China has the big advantage of having 1.4 billion people. So you have a big home market in China if the consumers are ready to consume more. That is a different question though, because with all the uncertainties, people are also more reluctant because they see war in Ukraine, they see the situation in Iran. So it's a complex situation.
But many people are so worried about the double standards, having said that though. For example, what is America first? The interpretation of that keep on changing every day according to some of the people that I've been talking to, whether it's politics or geopolitics or trade. And therefore, how can the forum, together with your stakeholders, be prepared for all the possibilities? It's almost, as some suggested, impossible. So from your perspective, Mr. President, improving the state of the world, you need to have a blueprint. So how would that blueprint work?
We will need to continue a dialogue. It needs to be an open and frank dialogue. It's important to also keep part of the structure and the multilateral system that we have built over decades, avoiding losing the baby with the bathwater. In this respect, though, Summer Davos in Tianjin this year is already a success. We haven't seen this kind of participation since we started the meeting 15 years ago. There is now close to 1,800 participants. We also see an increase in business participation from all over the world. Unfortunately, we had a little bit of people from the Middle East being a bit more reluctant the last days. But overall, the situation for the meeting is very strong. And what we're hearing, also from 150 public figures, ministers and presidents and also prime ministers coming in, is that this is a place where we have an impartial, non-political platform. We bring people together, and even in a polarized, fragmented world, there will be areas where there's overlap in interest, where countries can say, we disagree on this, but these are areas we can work together. That's what we're trying now to identify, also bringing in private sector.
Is that space ever bigger or ever smaller?
It is more complicated than in the past, because people even say, oh, we cannot go to that meeting because there are people we do disagree with in that room. And it should be the contrary. There are people there where we might have a different perspective. But since we are all in the same boat, if you look at the biggest challenges we are faced with, they're transboundary. So it can't be solved by one country alone. Look at, for example, cybercrime. We are losing maybe 5 to 6 trillion US dollars every year in cybercrime. I think Europe, China, India, US do agree that cybercrime is not a good thing. So to work on that should be possible. Look at climate change. We have more heat waves, we have more droughts, we have more floods, we have wildfires than at any other point in history. And we had the warmest year on record last year. Here we need to work together. And here I think now China, being the first electro-state in the world where electricity is at the core of energy, and most of it now is renewable, is a very, very important development that also others can learn from.
Well, the forum, according to you, Mr. President, aspires to be a platform for all and be able to share with one another. There are criticism about the international organizations in general. The rhetoric, political rhetorics undercut the credibilities of international organizations, including that of yours, actually has been rampant recently. So how do you and your team face that reality and be able to function right now?
So the World Economic Forum has been privileged in the sense that the criticism against our organization has been very limited because we are an impartial organization. We don't take a stand on political issues. Our most important thing is to bring people together through dialogue, see if there is overlap in the interest. And I think what is special also with the World Economic Forum is that we are the international organization for public-private cooperation. So we have thousands of the leading companies in the world as our partners. And more governments also want to work with the private sector and see that the private sector still has money because many countries are so indebted. Remember, we've not been so indebted since 1945. Some countries haven't been this indebted since the Napoleonic Wars. So if you really want something done, you also have to work with the private sector. And I think that's the beauty also of the summer Davos meeting, is that it's less political, it's more about technologies, innovators, entrepreneurs working together. And it's very interesting to see that the private sector is still working together, even if governments don't necessarily see eye to eye.
Final question for you, since you mentioned at the very beginning we are in a critical transition. How would you characterize this transition? Is it characterized by China-US decoupling? Is it characterized by AI transferring the world to a very different place? How would you characterize it?
I think that for the short term, it looks like it is soft power being replaced by strong power. Short term, it also seems like there is a disorder and not more order. Medium term, I do hope that we can move into a more multipolarish world where you accept that there are more players than one or two players, but there are several nations that are being listened to. But this multipolarish world needs also then to have multilateralism. Needs to be some rules of the game. Remember when President Xi Jinping was in Davos in 2017, he strongly underlined the importance of also traffic rules when it comes to interaction between countries. So now we have summer Davos. We're very privileged to have the premier and the key ministers from China, and maybe we can meet in January and we will be in a privileged position to even have even more senior Chinese participation.